"Dad is alive!" the boy screamed in the middle of his father's funeral. The sky was gray and heavy as family and friends gathered in the small chapel to pay their final respects to Roger. The casket stood among wreaths of flowers, while soft mourning hymns echoed through the room. Mariana sat in the front row, her hands protectively resting on her pregnant belly, her eyes empty and reddened from constant crying. Beside her, her 5-year-old son Pedro swung his legs restlessly. The adult spoke in hushed tones, offering Mariana gentle touches on the shoulder, but everything felt distant, like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Then, the unexpected happened. Pedro tugged at Mariana's arm, looked up at her with wide, serious eyes, and said loudly, "Dad isn't dead. He visited me last night and said he's coming to get me soon." For a moment, absolute silence filled the room. All eyes turned to the boy. Some smiled sadly, while others exchanged worried glances. Mariana froze, her heart pounding faster. Forcing a reassuring smile, she gently stroked her son's hair. "Pedro, my love, sometimes we dream of the people we love, but Daddy isn't here anymore." But Pedro shook his head vigorously. "No, it wasn't a dream. He was there, in our house." Mariana's sister Cynthia leaned toward them and whispered softly, "He doesn't understand yet. He's just trying to cope." But Pedro's determination unsettled Mariana. He kept repeating his words until she gently but firmly asked him to be quiet. Yet when she led him forward to place a flower on the casket, Pedro suddenly pulled away. "I don't want to do this. I won't say goodbye. Dad isn't dead." Then he yanked his hand from hers, threw the flower to the ground, and ran out of the chapel. Mariana called after him, but he was already gone. Outside, Pedro sat on a stone bench beneath an old tree, tears of frustration streaming down his face. Cynthia sat beside him, trying to comfort him. "Pedro, I know this is hard for you, but Daddy isn't coming back." Pedro wiped his tears away and looked straight at her. "Yes, he is. I saw him. I just know it." His voice was filled with such conviction that Cynthia was momentarily at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Mariana struggled to collect her thoughts. She wanted to believe that her son was simply grieving and escaping into a fantasy. But deep inside, a growing unease gnawed at her. Why was Pedro so certain? What if he knew something she didn't understand?
1 week had passed, but Pedro remained firm in his claim. "Daddy visited me. He said he'd be back soon." His words unsettled Mariana more and more. At first she had dismissed it as a child's fantasy, but with each passing day, as Pedro repeated his statement with unwavering certainty, a sense of unease gnawed at her. Why was he so sure? Why didn't it sound like the mere wish of a grieving child, but rather like a fact? She tried to ignore it, until she received an unexpected call from the police. A deserted vehicle had been found in the woods, only a few kilometers from her house. When officers checked the vehicle's registration, it quickly became clear. The car didn't belong to Roger. It was registered to a man named Danilo Mendez, who had been reported missing just 4 days earlier. The investigators found no connection between Danilo and Roger, yet the fact that the car had been discovered so close to Mariana's home raised serious questions. What was a stranger's car doing near her house? And why did no one seem to know where Danilo was? A cold shiver ran down Mariana's spine. Could this all be connected to Roger? Then came the shocking revelation. The police reviewed security footage from a nearby hotel, and on the screen they saw a man who looked exactly like Roger, alive and well. And he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a woman, Juliana Almeida, who had checked into the hotel with him. Mariana stared in disbelief at the photo the officer showed her. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. If Roger had really been at that hotel that night, then who was the man in the burned-out car? And most importantly, why had Roger faked his own death? Mariana felt the air leave her lungs as she watched the surveillance footage. Roger wasn't just alive. He seemed completely at ease, as if he had nothing to hide.
The woman beside him, Juliana Almeida, was a complete stranger to her. But the way they spoke to each other, the way Roger gently held the door open for her, sent a chilling shiver down Mariana's spine. Who was she? And more importantly, why had Roger faked his own death? Her thoughts raced. All the grief, the despair, the sleepless nights. Had it all been a lie? Meanwhile, the police requested the results of the DNA analysis to confirm the identity of the body in the car. But Mariana already knew what they would say. The dead man wasn't Roger. Investigators began to take a closer look at Roger's life. It turned out that in recent months, he had withdrawn large sums of money and opened multiple accounts abroad. There were also indications that he had connections to shady business partners. The theory that he was involved in fraud or some kind of criminal scheme was becoming more likely. But what was his plan? Had he intended to disappear and start a new life? Or had he planned to return one day? Mariana knew one thing for certain. She didn't know the man she had married as well as she thought she did. As she struggled to process everything that had happened, Pedro repeated in a steady voice, "Mama, Papa said he's coming to get me." And for the first time, a bone-chilling shiver ran down Mariana's spine. What if Pedro was telling the truth? What if Roger really was coming back? But not for her, for their son. Mariana was gripped by sheer panic when she saw Pedro's empty bed. His small backpack was missing. The front door stood slightly ajar. She called his name, running through the house, searching every room, but he was gone. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and dialed the police. The officers arrived within minutes, but Mariana already knew who was behind her son's disappearance. Roger. He had warned her, and no one had believed her. Now he had taken Pedro, and she had no idea where he was. The investigators immediately launched a full-scale search. A breakthrough came when surveillance footage from a nearby store revealed a crucial clue: a hooded man leading Pedro by the hand to a black car. The child seemed calm, as if he trusted his father. But Mariana knew the truth. Roger was a dangerous man, not just because of his lies, but because he had abandoned everything without hesitation, without remorse. If he had gone so far as to fake his own death, what else was he capable of? As the police set up roadblocks and monitored all possible escape routes, Mariana made a silent vow. She would get her son back, no matter what it took. The trail eventually led to an isolated house outside the city, where an anonymous caller had reported a suspicious vehicle. Mariana drove there with the police, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment they arrived, the officers stormed the house, and there in the living room stood Roger. Pedro was holding his hand, but the moment he saw his mother, his eyes lit up. "Mama!" He tore himself away and ran straight into her arms. Mariana held him close, pressing his tiny body against her own as the police tackled Roger to the ground. His gaze was ice cold, but Mariana wasn't afraid anymore. He had tried to control everything, but she had won back the only thing that truly mattered: her son. Roger was arrested on the spot, and for Mariana and Pedro, a new chapter began. This time, without lies, without fear, only the truth. Mariana thought she knew her husband, but his deception ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. Roger faked his death. He even kidnapped his own son. What do you think of this unbelievable story? Would you have seen through Roger's lies? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to share this video with your friends so they don't miss this shocking story. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to never miss another gripping story. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.